Let's be consistent.
Welcome back, guys, to the Key to Consistency. I am your host, Rakia Collins, and on today's episode, we're going to be exploring finances and consistency. What is the relationship between the two? What can we do to be more financially consistent? And I will be honest with you, this is not an easy topic for me to even bring to you guys because I feel like finances is always a journey, right? Depending on where you grew up, the talk that you heard around money. Was money a point of contention for your family? Was it something that everybody always, talked about in a way that, made you feel uncomfortable? Was everything always too expensive and you can never get the thing that you wanted to get? Or did you grow up in a home where, money wasn't really a problem? Like when you wanted something, if you did what you were supposed to do, you might have gotten a weekly allowance or, something to that extent, but money was never really a negative topic or something that was brought up in your home. So, as we engage in today's conversation, I really want to encourage you to just think about, your relationship to money from the lens of how you were first introduced to money. Because I think oftentimes we don't realize that the way that we look at the world, the way that we see things, current state, has a lot to do with the first time we were introduced to something. So it might have been, when you were, they say, between 0 and 7, those are our most impressionable ages, and those are the ages that we really begin to shape our relationship with the world. So just kind of take some time to, as we get into today's discussion, just think about your relationship with money and kind of what does that look like, right? So, the first thing that we're going to be talking about as it relates to money is the importance of consistent budgeting. And so, before we dive too deep into this first topic, I do want to give you guys some facts that I personally found pretty startling, but they do not surprise me. The first fact was that I found this one on AARP of all websites, but Americans now spend over $110 billion with a B, dollars annually on fast food. I want to just let that one just kind of sit there, right? The next fact that is also, brought to us by AARP is when we think about sales, right? You think about, buy one, get one 20% off. You think about those types of holiday sales since we're in the holiday season or coming out of a holiday season with the 4th of July. You might have saw a lot of, sales. Apparently, buy one, get one free is the most common and most popular, most loved sale, which isn't surprising, right? I can tell you, again, being transparent, that I am a buy one, get one free type of gal. And I say that to say, there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with loving a sale. But the problem is when we don't budget for those type of expenses, we don't realize that we tend to overspend. And so you feel like, man, there's so much month and I don't have any more money, right? It's the 20th of the month and there's on average there's 30 days in a month, right? And if you are always running short of money around the 20th of the month, just some areas I would encourage you to think about is, number one, given that apparently as Americans we spend over $100 billion a year in fast food, how often are you eating out compared to, how often you eat at home? When you think about sales, do you just sporadically go and shop and get stuff because they're on sale, but you don't necessarily have a need for those things, right? And so I do want to say that I am not here to antagonize, to, poke the bear, if you will, but just really want you guys today, specifically as we're talking through these items, just to kind of think about, where you stand. Do you have a consistent budget? Like, do you budget consistently? Are you an inconsistent budgeter? I will say, I'm pretty inconsistent with my budget, right? I don't think that I do as good of a job as I probably should when it comes down to money and budgeting specifically. I know that there are a lot, and I do mean a lot, of tools out there. You have your handy dandy Excel if all else fails. We have apps out here as well that help us manage our money, help us categorize things and prioritize things. But I would encourage you, especially if you are someone who is trying to, whether you're digging yourself out of a debt hole, or if you are, trying to strive and reach a certain goal, no matter where you are, if you're somewhere in between, if you're trying to do both, right? We are all on this journey of being consistent together. And as a first step today, I would encourage you to not even start budgeting. And I know that that sounds so crazy, but although we're talking about budgeting, I would encourage you to think through your relationship with money. How often do you check your checking account, right? Do you feel a level of fear when it comes down to you looking at your banking app and seeing how much money is in your account? Right? Because there's no way we can start budgeting if you have a interesting or confrontational or an aloof stance as it relates to your money, right? Like, you have to be comfortable with looking at it and being able to say, okay, this is how much money goes in my account, whether you have multiple sources of income, whether it is just you and you have a 9 to 5, whatever your financial situation is. Before we can even broach the topic of budgeting, an actionable step I would encourage you to take at this particular point is just to think about, what is my relationship to the money I currently have? Right? Do you have a tendency to spend all the way down to your account is in zero? Or do you look at the number 1,000 and you just see zero? Do you look at a higher number and see zero, right? Like, what is your relationship like with money? Once you've gotten that under control, once you've addressed your mindset around money, whether you have a poverty mindset or a scarcity mindset or a lack mindset, whatever type of mindset that you have, again, which is why I encourage this at the onset of this podcast, just to sit and do some reflection, because money is one of those conversations that can make you feel tense, especially if it's not something that you have in abundance, but you want to have an abundance of. I would definitely encourage you, before you start budgeting, before you download the apps, before you create your financial goal, before you do any of that. All of that is so very important, but it doesn't mean anything if you're not going to stick to it. And we have to understand where the trepidation lies and why you may not stick to it. A lot of it comes down to the relationship that you have with money. So I would encourage you, first and foremost, to look at that relationship, right? What is that relationship like with money? Once you've gotten a basis of what your relationship is like with money, then from there, I would encourage you to start budgeting, whether you again go very old school and you go to Excel, or if you want to download an app, and you want to kind of do your budget that way, most banking apps, do have some type of in-app experience where they will, preliminarily or for you, like categorize your money for you based on, health and wellness or beauty or food, right? So I would encourage you first to even look at your current banking app and see kind of what they offer out of the box, just to kind of give you a starting point. Because if you're swiping your card, those transactions have to go to your bank, right? And some of them do a great job of just kind of categorizing things for us and allowing that budgeting to be a lot less fearful, and a lot more informational as well. Today's episode is brought to you by the merch shop at thekeytoconsistency.com. I would encourage you to visit our merch shop to see if there's anything that piques your interest. One of the easiest ways to be consistent is to be visually reminded that you are on a mission. You are going to be consistent. So whether you pick up a phone case or you pick up a t-shirt, we have something for you. Again, that is www.thekeytoconsistency.com. And I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. Awesome, guys. So, our next topic that we're going to be addressing today around money is going to be consistent saving. And so, similar to our first topic of budgeting, I do want to open up consistent saving with just some facts I found while doing my research. So, I believe the company or the website is called GitNux, GITNUX. They say 60% of Americans don't have a budget, 33% of them have nothing saved for retirement, and 78% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Those are some very, very alarming facts. And again, while we are being consistent, we understand that consistency has to do with vulnerability. So I will tell you guys a little snippet of my story, and why, finances is something that while I'm not currently the best at, I would say I'm a lot better at it than I was in the past. So I went through a phase when I graduated from college, where I got a degree in finance, right? And so you would think, finance, wow, you're going to go and make great money. Well, that was not me. I graduated with my degree in finance and ended up working at Six Flags, making $10 an hour with a full bachelor's degree, right? And so it was during that particular phase in my life where I would say I became very adverse to money, right? Because I felt like there was never enough to go around. It took someone who I love very dearly, who was my boyfriend at the time, who ironically also had a finance degree, but took a different path and ended up going to New York and worked for a investment bank. So you can imagine having that type of relationship with someone where you're making $10 an hour, this person's working on Wall Street and they're making six figures. You can just imagine the dichotomy of a type of relationship like that. And so, a lot of that really, I think, contributed to the way that I viewed money, fresh out of college. And it really wasn't until I had begun, I got a better job, and then I got a better job, and then my jobs that I got just, kept getting better and better until I ended up at the role I'm at now in project management. But it really was, for me, eye-opening, because during that time when I was going a little bit back and forth with money and didn't really have the best relationship with it, he was the first person to ask me about my relationship with money, because he, felt like he was, seeing me do certain things. And it was just like, like, and of course, again, when we talk about money, that's not an easy topic to bring up, especially with someone that you love and someone that you're close to. So it took him a lot to, even broach that topic with me, and me being defensive, not wanting to admit the truth. I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't have any, like, I what? Like, who are you to tell me? And you begin to feel like you have to defend yourself. But that really was just my pride talking. And I didn't want to realize that I did have a very, shifty and very shaky relationship with money. And so, hopefully, telling you guys that story, you don't feel bad for being where you are, wherever you are with your relationship to money. We all have to go through things in our lives to allow us to be able to be the people that we want to be. And so, from having that conversation with him, that's really how I got into our second topic of consistent saving. From that experience, now a portion of my check immediately goes to my savings account, right? And I, again, am kind of in a midway point of my financial journey at this point. So I have a couple of savings accounts. What I like to call as like my real quote unquote savings account, that one is in a different bank, a bit further away, not further away by location, but further away by effort. Meaning, because I have that account, I know it'll take anywhere from 2 to 3 business days for me to get money out of that account. And that's a helpful blocker for me, because it's like when I need money from that account, I have to really, really think, do you really need this money? And for me, again, I'm not saying everybody needs that. Some people, you're totally fine having your savings account and your checking account all kind of saved up in one. But for me, it was the ability to have that real savings account a little ways away. And then I do also have what I like to call a smaller or readily available savings account that is automatically connected to my checking account in case I ever need some, additional funds for whatever reason. I don't have to wait a couple of days in order to get something. But, those are, hopefully that's a strategy that you guys can adopt as well, where you may have a bank that's further away from you, and then you have one that's connected to your regular checking account. And I would also encourage that when we think about, higher yield savings accounts, if you've never heard of them, I'd recommend kind of doing a quick Google search on, what is a high yield savings account and what banks offer that, and being able to find a bank that you're comfortable with, being able to open that up for you as your official savings account, if you will, just so you can have, options. If you don't already, I'd recommend, as you're prioritizing in your budget out of savings, even if it is nothing but $5 in that month, right? Like, the power of starting small. And I know, guys, I'm probably going to say this all throughout our time together. As long as you're listening to this podcast, I'm probably going to continue to preach about starting small, even if you have to start with $5, because we're not focusing on the amount, we're focusing on building a muscle. And in order to build a muscle, especially if you go to the gym, you're going to start with the 2.5 pound weight, or the 5 pound weight, or the 10 pound weight. But as you begin to get stronger, as you go to the gym more and more often, next thing you know, you're up to 50 pounds, you're up to 60 pounds, because you've begun to build that muscle over time. And so the same thing with finances, right? I would encourage you to start where you are with what you have, because that whole idea of, well, I'll wait to do it, or I'll wait for tomorrow, trust me, it's not going to happen. And better yet, I'd recommend you setting that up to be an automatic draft. Like, even if you say, I'm just going to send $5 to this account, right? Just send $5. It doesn't matter where you start, but you just have to make sure that you start. And the lovely thing about automatic withdrawals is that you don't have to even think about it, right? It's not something that I think about because it's already set up and it's been that way for years. It automatically, one, forces me to live off of a smaller percentage of my regular money that I'll get from my job because I'm not so concerned or so, pressed about, oh, hey, you're living off of, 100%. It's like, no, you're likely living off of 70% or something to that extent, right? The next thing I would encourage you to do as we're thinking about, savings and automatic transfers is to make sure, is again, to the best of your ability, that you have an emergency fund. Guys, I did not have an emergency fund until I was 26, 27-ish years old because, again, I did not realize the importance of having money set aside for a quote unquote rainy day. And if you're listening to this podcast in June or July of 2023, then you know the economic conditions that we're living in. Inflation is crazy. There's so much going on. It is imperative that you have something to fall back on. And again, same concept with the automatic transfers. Start small. Start with 5. Start with 10. Start wherever you can, because I promise you, when you look back on that account and you see that your 5s and that your 10s, they add up over time. They really, truly do. And of course, I'm not suggesting that you stay there. I'm just suggesting that you start there. Because once you start there, you begin to build a muscle to say, I can no longer live off of 100% of my money. So if I used to get, Starbucks or fast food, you know, a meal at, let's say, Chick-fil-A, if you get like a number one or something like that, I think that's like, $10, $12. Start by just saying, I'm not gonna eat out. I'm gonna save that money, right? And I'm gonna cook at home, and the money I would spend on fast food, I'm gonna put that into a savings account, right? So that way, you're not only saving money, you're probably doing something great for your health as well, right? So that's a double benefit for that particular area of your life. But outside of, again, automatic transfers, emergency funds, guys, we have to save for retirement. We have to have retirement accounts. Like, even if you have a job and they have you set up for a 401k, that's probably the easiest way to get started. But I would encourage you even to go beyond that, to go beyond your job, to look into setting up, your own 401k, like setting up a Roth IRA. Like, there's so many different options that you can use to make sure that you are saving for your future. And I know it's probably counterintuitive because we live in a society where it's everything has to be done right now. If it's not done right now, I don't want it. But we have to slowly get out of that mindset, especially listening to this podcast. Because if you're going to live the life that you truly, truly want for yourself and for those that you love, it cannot be about instant gratification. So, the last major topic that I want us to address during our time together is going to be thinking about debt management. This has a lot to do with instant gratification. I know that with social media and the way the world is spinning, it's like everybody seems to have everything right now. But I'm telling you, we don't know what those people did to get what they have. And that can be a good thing or a bad thing, right? Someone could have really worked hard for 5, 6, 7 years to get where they are. And then someone could have done something illegal to get where they are, right? And so I would encourage you, one, not to compare yourself to anyone else in terms of their journey, in terms of their stuff, in terms of what they have. None of that stuff matters, because if you're chasing the things and you don't have any value or any root connected to why you want the thing that you want, other than, oh, everyone seems to have it, so I'm just going to go get it, you'll find that not only will you tend to overspend, again, going back to budgeting, you are probably going to go into your savings to get something that you likely won't even be leveraging in the next year or two. And that's ultimately just going to put you in a worse financial position years down the line. When we think about finances and when we think about life in general, I would encourage you not just to think about yourself. If we are our sole motivating factors for why we do what we do, it probably won't get done, right? Because it's just about us. And if it's just about you, I can do it when I want to. I can do it when I, feel like it, because it's just about me. But if it's about your child not eating, if it's about someone you love, going without because of a decision that you made, we tend to have a lot more effort and a lot more energy to be able to do things for other people because we're not focusing on ourselves. So I would encourage you, when you think about your debt, of course, number one, first and foremost, have a plan to try to get out of debt. There are a lot of different programs. I'm not going to start dropping names because, people may feel a way about some of the names that I drop, but there are a lot of debt reduction, debt management programs out there that'll give you a foundation, that'll give you a layout in terms of, how you can manage your money. One easy way would be to cut off your credit cards and don't get credit cards for things that readily advance. That has been my go-to for not having a lot of credit cards. And what do I mean by readily advance? An Apple credit card, a Best Buy credit card, you won't catch me with them because technology is advancing too fast. And of course, if I see it, I'm going to, oh, well, I can get the credit card. Oh, well, I can just, no, 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 no. I'm not doing that. Not doing that at all, right? And that's specific for you because you know the area that you're most weakest in, right? For you, it may not be technology. For you, it may be that Sephora credit card that you have. You go to Sephora, you buy makeup all the time, right? Like that may be your thing, right? Whatever your thing is, you want to make sure that you don't give a credit card for that thing, right? Until you feel like you are in a space where, hey, I'm financially mature enough to where if I get this credit card, I'm not going to just run it up, right? Because we have to be cognizant, of course, of interest rates and things of that nature and good debt versus bad debt. Like, we have to be aware that these things matter and that if you know your vice, don't get a credit card in your vice. Long story short, right? So I will certainly do another podcast diving deeper into debt management because there's so many like avenues, there's so many ways that you can talk about debt and you can talk about, your consistency and your spending habits and things of that nature. But hopefully when we think about debt in terms of this podcast and your level of consistency, we're going to consistently say no when we are at our favorite store and these individuals are offering us credit cards. We are not going to, this is going to be tough for me to say, but we are not going to extend our credit to our loved ones because that is an easy way to get into debt because that's not your debt. You are taking on debt for someone else, and that's not always a great thing. That within and of itself is a whole different podcast. So I will leave our debt management area there for now. Final action items when we think about debt management, of course, creating a financial plan, including in that overall financial plan, what is your plan for budgeting? What is your plan for saving? What is your plan for debt management? And really being consistent with these areas, checking in on, hey, how am I doing? Am I consistently keeping track of how much I'm spending in these areas? Or, was I just hype after listening to the podcast and I was like, oh, I'm going to go start my budget. And then you just kind of did your financial plan one time, you kind of left it, right? If you can also, I'd say if you can afford it, seek professional advice, right? Get, a financial planner, or better yet, go to YouTube. Like, there are a lot of people who give really good advice. But again, when you listen to advice, make sure that advice goes through your mentals and you are actually processing, is this feasible for my situation? Don't just take advice and just say, hey, everyone's doing this, so let me just do this. It may not be cut to the continuity of your situation. And lastly, we want to just remember to consistently and regularly review and adjust our plan as needed, right? Like, there's no such thing as a one size fits all, especially when it comes to budgeting and finance and the world that we live in today. So we just really want to make sure that we are always regularly reviewing and adjusting our plan as needed. Awesome, guys. So hopefully you found today's episode helpful. You found that, there are some things that you can actually take into account that will make your financial life a lot easier. The last thing, of course, that I always want to leave you with is a Bible verse. So, the Bible verse that we're going to speak on today is going to come from Proverbs 21, verse 20. And it's a very short, sweet, simple one. It says, "A wise man saves for the future." Guys, so just making sure that we're saving for our future, that we are making decisions with our future in mind. And as long as we do that consistently, we are going to be okay. So hopefully you guys learned something from this episode as it related to your finances and how we can be more consistent in those finances. Remember, guys, that consistency breeds mastery and transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary. And until next time, bye, guys. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of The Key to Consistency. Wherever you are listening to this podcast, it would mean everything to me if you could rate it, review it, reach out to me on Instagram. Would love your feedback, would love to hear anything you like, anything you don't like. Please feel free to share this episode with someone that you think could benefit from it. And until next time, bye, guys.